Meanwhile, two prominent names are seeking to put the Pope on trial for crimes against humanity. Author Richard Dawkins and author and journalist Christopher Hitchens are working with British lawyers to see if the Pope can actually be arrested during a visit to Britain in September. Christopher joins me now with more on this. Thanks for joining us again. First of all, how were you able to find, it seems, an attorney willing to try to pursue this, as we've heard so much about the power of the church and people being unwilling to challenge this?
Well, there's a very famous human rights counsel in London called Jeff Robertson, who's written a number of books on universal jurisdiction, who knows very well about the International Criminal Court, and who thinks that the Vatican can't claim sovereign immunity as a state, which is what the Church has already said in advance. The Church obviously knows it's in danger here, because it's already prepared a defense strategy of saying, no, the Pope is a head of state. We're going to challenge that too. And
they made that declaration a couple of weeks right in the heart of the Holy Week, pointing out that the Pope would have immunity. But what does this lawyer say, Christopher? What would they use evidence, perhaps some of these memos that have been leaked out? What would be the fuel for the fire? Go ahead.
What we have is very plain evidence, some of it with the Pope's own signature on it, as well as what you might call his fingerprints, of a very long-standing agreement between senior members of the Church to obstruct justice, excuse me, and to cover up a particularly revolting felony. Now, isn't it amazing that this is always discussed as if it's the Church's internal affair? Why do we make the assumption that the Church can be the judge in this case, in its own case? What is the law doing? I'll give you an example from the United States. Why does the Justice Department not demand the extradition of Cardinal Law of Boston, who fled the jurisdiction rather than answer questions under oath after it had been revealed that he'd sheltered and protected appalling pederasts? Why do we say, well, he's gone to a foreign town now, that's the end of our inquiries? Isn't there anyone in this country, any officer of the law, who will say, we have to do something to protect and vindicate these children?
Well, there is one case in Kentucky.
I might add, Cardinal Law was allowed to vote in the election of this Pope, who'd given him, in a sense, asylum from the inquiries in Boston, which had enraged the laity.
There are many who agree with you on that, Christopher, and we know that there's the case in Kentucky, which is why the Vatican responded about immunity. But let me ask you, there are people who say, listen, this is just a headline for us to chit-chat about, but the reality of being able to charge the Pope, of all people, with crimes against humanity will never happen.
Well, let's see if he feels like coming to England and testing the proposition. That's the next trip we know he's going to make.
Do you think that there would be some type of avoidance?
Then all right, then okay, fine. Then consider the alternative. The alternative is we publicly declare that if you can call yourself a priest of any kind, or a high priest as the Pope is, then you don't have to answer any questions about the rape and torture of children. That would be a grotesque situation, but it wouldn't it?
Well, let me ask you.
But it is now the situation. So are we to say that there's a category of person who lives and commits crime and covers up crime above and beyond the law, or not? And if so, how are we going to live with ourselves? And what are we going to tell the children?
Christopher, there are people who point out, obviously, that you yourself, Richard Dawkins, both are atheists, that this is what is fueling your desire to take on the Church in this way. Are you getting support from devout Catholics and Christians who say that the Pope, as you put it, should be arrested?
The solicitor with whom we've been talking in London is a believing Christian. This isn't a test of church doctrine, it's a test of church conduct, and not of atheism, I would say of secularism, of the separation of church and state, or rather the non-immunity of church from law.
And Christopher, what is the next step then with this attorney?
Well, I think we're going to approach the International Criminal Court first, because it doesn't particularly matter whether the Pope wants to travel or not. I mean, I think he could probably be served where he is. And then there are a number of other legal options. There are an enormous number of potential plaintiffs and victims, and of course we're taking advice from them and from organizations that represent them. If you look at the record now in Ireland, in Germany, where it's getting worse every day, the terrible 3 cases involving the Pope himself, the ones in Munich, the deaf and dumb school in Wisconsin, 200 deaf and dumb children, and the Pope says, let the poor man go. He's old now, he's ill, even though the diocese wants him gone. Then this completely depraved sadist, Father Kiesel, in Oakland, and the Pope's name is on the letter, saying, no, let this guy go too, give him a break, he's too young.
Well, this is some of the evidence you and others are pointing to.
All this consideration for these hardened, calcified sadists, and never a single mention of the rights of the children. And only concern shown for the reputation of Holy Mother Church. Well, they've lost that now, haven't they? But I think that means also that they have to face judgment. Justice is coming.